I was just a kid when my life took a turn that no one could have predicted. Up until then, my world had been simple, full of laughter, scraped knees, and bedtime stories. We lived in a quiet town in Montana, the kind of place where everyone knew each other, where the smell of fresh-baked pies lingered in the air from the little bakery on Main Street, and where church bells rang every Sunday, a familiar and comforting sound. My father, Daniel, was the kind of man everyone respected. He was our town's pastor, but he was also so much more. He coached a little league team, helped fix broken fences, and knew everyone by name. My mother, Emily, was just as loved, a schoolteacher with a warm smile, the kind that made kids feel safe even when they struggled with their lessons. And then there was me, Ethan, and my younger sister, Lily. We were an ordinary family, living an ordinary life. At least, that's what we thought. Looking back, I can still picture the days before it all changed. Afternoons spent running barefoot through golden fields, my little sister trying to keep up, our dog chasing behind us. I loved tagging along with my dad, watching him shake hands with neighbors, always ready to help someone in need. I remember the way my mom tucked me in at night, her soft hum filling the room like a lullaby. Life felt safe, predictable, like it would always be that way. But life doesn't always follow the script we imagine. It started with a stomachache. Nothing serious at first, just a little discomfort, the kind every kid gets now and then. My parents thought it was just a bug, something that would pass in a day or two. But the pain didn't fade. It worsened. It became unbearable. I can still hear my mother's voice as she called my father, her usual calm replaced by something I had never heard before, fear. Something's wrong, Daniel. It's not normal. I remember clutching my stomach, my tiny fingers gripping the fabric of my shirt, tears slipping down my face as waves of pain crashed over me. My father tried to reassure me, to hold me steady, but I could see it in his eyes. He was scared, too. We rushed to the doctor, hoping for simple answers. Instead, we got the kind of news that makes your world tilt beneath you. His appendix is ruptured. We need to operate immediately. Those words echoed through the room like a thunderclap. My mother gasped, covering her mouth, while my father clenched his jaw, his hands turning into fists at his sides. My little sister didn't understand what was happening, but she clung to my mom's leg, her blue eyes wide with worry. The next few hours were a blur. Sirens, hospital corridors, the cold sterility of the emergency room. I was wheeled away, my parents' voices growing distant. Then, just before I slipped under anesthesia, my father bent down, pressing his forehead against mine. His voice was thick with emotion. "I love you, buddy." I tried to answer, but my voice felt weak, my body sinking into something heavy. The last thing I saw before my eyes closed was the bright, sterile light above me. Then everything changed. Before we continue this incredible story, I want to take a moment to thank everyone who is part of this amazing community. Your support means the world. If you're watching this, I have a special request for you. Drop your name and city in the comments below, and in our next video, we'll send you a personalized message. Imagine thousands of people hearing your name, feeling connected, and being part of something truly special. And of course, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps this community grow, bringing even more inspiring messages to people around the world. Together, we're building something truly beautiful. Now, let's continue this journey. Something incredible is about to be revealed. The moment my eyes closed, I felt weightless. It was as if the world had melted away, and I was no longer confined to my small, frail body. I couldn't hear the beeping machines, the frantic voices of the nurses, or the distant sobs of my mother. Instead, there was silence, vast, endless, and strangely comforting. At first, I thought I was dreaming. Everything felt surreal, like floating between sleep and wakefulness, yet somehow more real than anything I had ever known. I wasn't in the hospital anymore. I was above it. I could see my own body lie on the operating table, still and fragile, surrounded by doctors moving with urgency. The harsh, artificial light illuminated their faces, their furrowed brows slick with sweat as they worked frantically. The sight should have terrified me, but it didn't. There was no fear, no pain, only an overwhelming sense of peace. I drifted higher. Below me, through the walls and ceilings, I saw my parents. My mother was on the phone, her voice shaking as she spoke to someone. Maybe my grandmother, maybe a friend, I couldn't tell. Tears streamed down her face, her fingers gripping the receiver, as if holding on to it could somehow keep me tethered to life. My father was different. He wasn't speaking. He paced back and forth in the waiting room, his hands clasped together, his head bowed. His lips moved silently, whispering prayers he had probably recited 1,000 times before. But this time, there was something else, desperation. He wasn't just praying, he was pleading. Something inside me ached as I watched them. I wanted to tell them I was okay, that I wasn't afraid, that I knew something they didn't. But before I could try, before I could even begin to understand what was happening, everything around me shifted. The hospital disappeared, and I was no longer floating. I was somewhere else. At first, all I saw was light. Not the kind of light that comes from the sun or a lamp. This was different. It wasn't coming from above or from any single source. It was everywhere, within everything, pulsating gently like the rhythm of a heartbeat. The colors weren't like anything I had ever seen. They weren't just bright. They were alive, blending and shifting in ways that defied explanation. I took a breath, except I wasn't breathing. Not in the way I was used to. There was no struggle, no sensation of air filling my lungs, yet I felt more alive than I ever had before. Then I heard something. Music, but not the kind of music played on a radio or sung in church. It was everywhere, woven into the very air itself, a symphony of voices and melodies that I didn't just hear. I felt them, like waves of warmth washing over me. And then I saw them, figures moving in the distance, bathed in the golden glow of this impossible place. They weren't walking, not exactly. They were gliding, their very presence radiating something indescribable. Joy, love, purity. I felt drawn to them, an instinct deeper than anything I had ever known. I wasn't afraid. In fact, I had never felt safer. The warmth in the air was unlike anything I had ever felt before. Not heat, not cold, just a perfect, living warmth. It wrapped around me like an embrace, not from arms, but from something deeper, something eternal. I took a step, except I wasn't really stepping. I moved effortlessly, gliding toward the radiant figures in the distance. As I drew closer, their shapes became clearer. They weren't just beings, they were people. At first, their faces were indistinct, yet strangely familiar, as if I had always known them, though I couldn't recall from where. Then one of them stepped forward. He was tall, dressed in flowing white, but the most striking thing about him wasn't his clothing. It was his eyes. They were unlike any eyes I had ever seen before. Deep, endless, filled with knowledge beyond anything I could comprehend. But most of all, they radiated love. The kind of love that sees every part of you, even the pieces you try to hide, and still embraces you fully. I knew who he was before he even spoke. Jesus. I didn't need an introduction. There was no doubt in my mind. It wasn't the face in the paintings in church, and yet I knew him, as if I had always known him, as if he had always known me. He smiled, and the light around him seemed to breathe, not flickering, but alive, pulsing gently with a warmth that filled me to my core. He took a step closer, and without a word, I understood something I had never realized before. I was home. Not my home back in Montana, not the small house on the quiet street, where my mother made pancakes on Sunday mornings and my dad told bedtime stories. No, this was home in a way I had never known. Tears filled my eyes, though I didn't know why. I wasn't sad. In fact, I had never felt more complete. Then he spoke. His voice was unlike anything I could describe. Powerful yet soft, commanding yet gentle, like the sound of a river and the whisper of the wind all at once. And what he said changed everything. It's not your time. A strange feeling washed over me. Not disappointment, not fear, just understanding. I had to go back. But why? I looked up at him, and I realized something. He wasn't just sending me back. He was entrusting me with something. There was purpose in this. A message. Before I could ask, he reached out, placing a hand on my shoulder. though his touch was light. It sent waves of something powerful through me, something I didn't fully understand yet. And then, the light around me began to shift. The warmth started to fade, and suddenly, I was falling, but not like falling from a great height. There was no fear, no panic, just a sensation of being gently pulled away, as if the very fabric of this place was loosening its embrace on me. The warmth, the music, the impossible light, it all began to fade. I didn't want to leave. I looked up, searching for him again. Jesus, his eyes, filled with love, never wavered, never turned away. There was no sadness in them, only certainty. You have work to do. And then, everything went dark. For a moment, I was lost in nothingness, as if suspended between two worlds. Then, like a sudden gasp of air after being underwater too long, I felt something pull me back. Pain. It rushed through my body, sharp and unbearable. A blinding white light burned my vision, and voices, muffled at first, began to rise around me, beeping. Footsteps. I was back. I blinked, the ceiling of the hospital room coming into view. My body felt heavy, weaker than I had ever known. I tried to move, but it was as if my limbs had forgotten how. Then I heard a voice. Ethan, my mother. Her face appeared above me, her eyes red, her hands trembling as she pressed them against my cheek. And then my father, his face contorted with emotion, his fingers gripping my hand, as if afraid to let go. They thought they had lost me. I wanted to tell them everything, about where I had been, what I had seen, the message I had been given. But my lips barely moved, my voice a whisper. I saw him. Their eyes widened, but before I could say more, exhaustion overtook me, and my body surrendered to sleep. I had returned, but I knew I was not the same. Something inside me had changed, something that would never let me see the world the same way again. A special request from the heart. If you've been touched by this story, I want to ask you something from the bottom of my heart. This channel exists because of passion, not profit. We don't gain anything from sharing these messages, but your support means everything to us. By simply subscribing, you become part of this beautiful community, a family bound by faith, hope, and purpose. Your subscription is a small act with huge impact, a way of saying, I believe in this message. I want to see more. Please, take a moment to hit that subscribe button. It's free for you, but it means the world to us. Together, we are spreading something powerful. Let's keep this light shining. The days after I woke up were a blur of whispered prayers, cautious smiles, and lingering uncertainty. My parents rarely left my side, their eyes scanning my face for any sign of distress. Nurses came and went, their voices gentle, their hands adjusting machines that beeped in quiet reassurance. But I was somewhere else entirely. I was back in my body, yes, but something had shifted. It was as if I'd been rewired, as if my soul no longer fit neatly inside my skin. At first, I kept it to myself. I wasn't sure how to explain it, or if anyone would even believe me. I was only 14. After all, how could I possibly put into words the things I'd seen, the presence I had felt? But the memories wouldn't stay silent. They pressed against my mind like waves against the shore, refusing to fade. And then, without warning, they began to surface. The first time it happened, my mother was adjusting my pillow, brushing a stray piece of hair from my forehead the way she always did when she thought I was asleep. You were so strong, she whispered. I thought we lost you, Ethan. I looked at her, really looked at her, and something in me shifted. I wasn't afraid, Mom, I said softly. She froze, her eyes locking onto mine. Before she could respond, the words tumbled from my lips, unfiltered and raw. I saw him, her breath caught in her throat. I could see the war in her eyes, the desperate hope battling against the fear of what she might hear next. Who, sweetheart? She asked gently. I swallowed, my throat dry. Jesus. The room fell silent. My mother's hands trembled slightly as she reached for my father, who had just walked in, coffee cup in hand. He took one look at her face and set it down, moving to the edge of my bed. You saw Jesus? He asked, his voice careful, measured, like he was afraid of breaking something fragile. I nodded, and then For the first time, I told them everything. I told them about the light, the warmth that wasn't just warmth but love itself, the music that wasn't just music, but a song that filled every corner of existence. The people I saw moving like waves of golden light, their joy woven into the very air. And then I told them about him, how his eyes saw everything, not just my face, but my entire being, every thought, every mistake, every hidden fear. And still, he loved me. Still, he smiled. Still, he reached out his hand. My father sat down heavily, rubbing his hands over his face. My mother was crying, her fingers pressed to her lips as if holding back an emotion too deep for words. I waited for them to say something, anything, but all they did was stare at me, their eyes wide with something I couldn't quite place. It wasn't doubt. It wasn't fear. It was awe. The weight of my parents' silence pressed into the room. For a moment, I wondered if I had said too much, if I had broken something delicate between us. But then my mother reached out, grasping my hand tightly, her fingers trembling. "Tell me again," she whispered. "Tell me everything." And so I did. I spoke of the colors that weren't just colors but living light, how they shimmered and pulsed with something beyond human understanding. I described the music that wasn't played, but simply existed, wrapping itself around me like a melody I had always known. I told them how I had seen them in the waiting room, my father pacing, my mother crying into phone. I repeated the very words they had spoken, words I should not have been able to hear while unconscious on an operating table. But the hardest part to explain was what came next, because I had been given something, not just an experience, not just a memory, a message. Jesus didn't just smile at me. He didn't just welcome me into his presence. He looked at me with purpose, with an understanding that ran deeper than anything I had ever known. "It's not your time." I had to go back. I had to tell them. My father swallowed hard, his gaze unblinking. "Tell who, Ethan?" I hesitated, not because I didn't know, but because it was everyone. All of them. I finally said, "Everyone who needs to hear it." My mother let out a quiet sob, covered her mouth as tears slipped down her cheeks. My father's hands balled into fists, not in anger, but in overwhelm. I didn't know how I was going to do it. I didn't know why Jesus had chosen me. But I knew one thing for certain. I had been sent back for a reason, and I couldn't ignore it. If this story has touched your heart, if you feel the warmth of faith stirring within you, leave a comment below with AMM. By doing so, you are welcoming a blessing into your life, affirming your faith, and joining others in this incredible journey of belief. And don't forget to like this video. A single like helps spread this message to more people who need to hear it, just like you did today. You are not alone. You are part of something greater. The days that followed were unlike anything I had ever known. My body healed, but my soul was forever changed. I wasn't just Ethan anymore. Not the same boy who played baseball in the backyard, who raced his sister through golden fields, who believed life would always be simple. I had seen too much, felt too much, and now I had to carry the weight of knowing. At first, I tried to push it aside, to pretend I could step back into my old life. But it didn't take long to realize that God doesn't give you a message like this to keep it hidden. One evening, my father sat across from me at the dinner table, his face quiet, contemplative. "You haven't been the same since you woke up," he said. I looked down at my plate, not sure how to answer. "That's because I'm not the same," I finally admitted. "I can't be." He nodded slowly, as if he had already known. "Then don't keep it inside," he said. "If Jesus sent you back with a purpose, then you have to trust that he'll show you how to fulfill it." His words settled deep inside me, a confirmation of what I had already felt pressing against my heart. This wasn't just my experience. This was a message for the world. And so I began to tell my story, first to my family, then to close friends. Soon, whispers of it spread through our small town, people gathering in our living room just to hear what I had seen. I watched the way their eyes changed when I spoke, the way hope flickered back into faces that had once been weary, the way faith began to spark in those who had long let it fade. I hadn't just been given a second chance at life. I had been given a mission, a mission to remind people that heaven is real, that Jesus sees them, knows them, and loves them, that there is something greater waiting beyond this life. And as the days turn into weeks and the weeks into months, I realized something. This was only the beginning. This journey doesn't end here. There's so much more to be revealed, and I have something incredibly powerful waiting for you in the next video. It will open your eyes and change your life. Just click on the video that's appearing on your screen right now. Trust me, you won't want to miss what comes next. And before you go, don't forget to leave a like and comment. Amen below. By doing so, you are opening your heart to more blessings, keeping your faith strong, and ensuring that this message continues to reach those who need it most. You are part of something greater. You are never alone.